It is good to be back with you for the second hour of Chris Jansing Reports, shoring up testimony after the defense tried to pick it apart. With the lunch break in, Donald Trump's hush money trial almost over and the jury set to get back in roughly 15 minutes. The prosecution will continue its redirect with the witness who has laid the groundwork for the entire prosecution case, former National Enquirer CEO David Pecker. The defense spent hours trying to trip him up, catch him in contradictions, even introducing several instances where they say Pecker's recollection of key events had changed over time. But the prosecution got the last word before lunch, getting Pecker to admit that Karen McDougal's story would have been National Enquirer gold. And his decision not to run it was purely to help Donald Trump. Joining me now, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard outside the courthouse. Former federal prosecutor Paul Butler is back with me. Former Assistant New York Attorney General Tristan Snell is here in the studio. Also with me, Jeremy Saland, criminal defense attorney and former Manhattan prosecutor. I'm going to start with you because you're a defense attorney and because you're new to this table. It's a challenge, right? Because no matter how many times the defense keeps going back and back and back to David Pecker, trying to show this wasn't about the campaign. This is what you did. This is standard operating procedure. They said that over and over and over again yesterday. Let me give you one of the later pieces of back and forth. And this is Steinglass trying to, again, disprove what Bovee had just done, the defense attorney. How many, meaning of these stories, did you coordinate with a presidential candidate for the benefit of a campaign? It's the only one. In this case, did you suppress stories to help a presidential candidate, Pecker? Yes. How do you think the defense is doing when that's what they're faced with?
I think they did score some points. It's the only president, that's for certain. But we heard about Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example. So it wasn't the first time this has happened. We've heard about this other times before. And in fact, there was a relationship starting back, I think, in 1998 with the former president, well, who then was not the president. So I think the defense did score some points, but not as much as they think, because Pecker came across as a pretty reasonable, regular guy. Maybe there were some mistakes in his memory, but not some malicious, ill-willed person. So I think they scored points, but not as much as they would like to have.
Let me go back to Vaughn Hilliard. And Vaughn, give us a little recap of what were some of the highlights of the day, and we'll talk about them on the other side. Look, this is what happens in trials, right? The prosecution tries to shore up the testimony. The defense tries to knock it down. That's exactly how it goes in every trial. But in this trial, what were some of the key moments that you saw?
Over the course of the 3 hours this morning of the cross-examination of David Pecker, the team for Donald Trump was trying to hone in on questions around his own story. There was that January of 2017 meeting, I think is the best example, where David Pecker earlier this week, answering the prosecution's questions, testified that he showed up in Trump Tower about 2 weeks before he was sworn in as president, and he replaced the likes of Sean Spicer, Reince Priebus, James Comey, other soon-to-be cabinet officials in a meeting at Trump Tower, and in conversation with Donald Trump, that he thanked him for, I should say Donald Trump thanked David Pecker and AMI for purchasing the rights of Dino the Doorman's story as well as Karen McDougal's story. And that is what was testified by David Pecker just this week. But then when Donald Trump's defense team had the opportunity to cross-examine him this morning, they said, well, then why did you tell federal prosecutors in July of 2018 that you did not recall Donald Trump thanking you for purchasing the rights to those two stories? And David Pecker said, I'm not sure why the transcript read that way. All I can tell you now is that I recall him thanking me. And this is part of the defense team's efforts to call into question not only the veracity of that story that David Pecker was sharing, but generally his memory about events that took place now almost 9 years ago, almost 8 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And just that one example was a key to them, at least in the jury's mind, of having them question the veracity of his retelling, or at least what he recalled, versus what he would testify today when answering the prosecution's questions.
Tristan, let me give you another example. Part of the defense strategy was stressing that this $150,000 that went to Karen McDougal wasn't we're not talking about hush money here. We're paying about, she was on the cover of a couple of magazines. She had ghostwritten a couple of columns that were in magazines that were also published by AMI, the publisher of National Enquirer. But on redirect, the prosecution asked this, quote, "Is that true, Mr. Pecker? Was that your purpose in locking up the Karen McDougal story, to influence the election?" Again, yes. Is that the advantage of the prosecution, being able to prep a witness? Is that good witness preparation? Or is it maybe that, but also just that's the truth as he sees it?
I mean, you can always say that it was coaching, of course. But I think the thing is that there's also a common sense element to this. $150,000 for a couple of covers and ghostwriting some columns, a column that's usually about, $300. I hope somebody actually points that out, that like you don't get paid $150,000 to write a magazine or newspaper column. You don't get anywhere near that. You get like a few $100 tops. You usually get even less than that, or zero. Like, it doesn't make sense that it would be that much for the services that they supposedly rendered here. That was window dressing to make it look good. I do think that there's a common sense element to this that's going to be difficult for the jury to get around.
Is he right, Jeremy? Because I'm looking at the look on your face and you're nodding.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Why are they even pursuing McDougal in the first place? And it just so happens that there's a story that wants to be, prevented from
just
coming public.
Happens.
So you don't leave your common sense. You got a little here and a little here. You don't leave it at the courthouse footsteps. You go in with it and you leave with it. So I think that's a fair statement.
If we look forward, Paul, Pecker's testimony also seemed to set up potential testimony from Hope Hicks, very close to Donald Trump, left the administration on good terms. Pecker says Hope Hicks, he says he discussed the McDougal agreement with her, along with then White House aide and currently Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This would have been in the spring of 2018, well after Donald Trump had taken office. What's the relevance, if any, as you see it, of the fact that this was happening after Trump had been elected?
Yeah, so we know that Hope Hicks was involved in these calls with Cohen, Trump, and AMI. She's going to be a super important witness because she doesn't have Cohen's baggage, Michael Cohen's baggage. It's just the opposite. Michael Cohen now detests Donald Trump. And Hope Hicks was Team Trump all the way during the period that's the subject of this indictment. So it makes her especially credible. She's going to be able to connect the hush money payments with Trump's presidential ambitions. That's what the prosecution also needed David Pecker to do, to link the catch and kill agreement to the campaign. And that's exactly what he did. So again, the defense tried to attack Pecker's credibility and motive to testify. They didn't score any big points. And they're not going to be able to go there with Hope Hicks. She's going to be a strong witness for the prosecution.
Jeremy, before the break, defense spent a lot of time grilling David Pecker about a non-prosecution agreement. The jurors learned an awful lot about catch and kill. On one hand, it's pretty straightforward, right? Catch and kill is you find out that there's a story that you want to bury, you pay for it, and you make sure that they sign an agreement that says nobody else ever gets this story, right? But there's also a lot of weeds to it. What was the NDA? But basically, on the face of it, do jurors get what's happening here as from what you've heard so far?
I think so. And these non-prosecution agreements, these agreements to testify, these are not atypical. And Pecker is well prepared to answer those questions. I think there was a line of attack there about AMI wanting to be sold, and you had to clear this up before, because if it wasn't cleared up, you were not going to get the money, or it wasn't going to go to sale. So that's why you're doing it. And you learn that's really, in the end of the day, that was relevant, but that really wasn't why. There was still money that was going to be made. So these questions, again, it's the little holes that they're poking, but does it build enough? I don't know as of yet.
You keep talking, Kristen, about common sense. Mm-hmm. And I've had an opportunity in some cases in the past to talk to jurors after the fact. Yeah. And I think most people, and you guys can disagree with me, but I think most people I talk to, jurors take very seriously. And we heard that even in some of the cases in voir dire here. The jurors said, I can be fair, right? And they take that into the jury room. Most jurors feel like this is, and especially I would think in a case like this, they have an awesome responsibility. So they look at the evidence, but how much is about the evidence and how much of it is about common sense? Who's going to pay $150,000 for a couple of articles and a couple of covers of magazines that, not to disparage the people who worked on those magazines, weren't exactly A-list magazines?
Even if they had been A-list magazines, they don't pay.
They're still not getting 150
Anybody who's in
grand.
the media industry knows exactly what publications pay, and it's not that. Like, there's too many zeros on that number. Let's just put it that way. Look, the kicker here is that you do weigh the evidence, but the common sense is what turns that evidence into a narrative. And that narrative is what determines how the jury comes out. They're gonna construct a story. Both sides are having their story that they're putting out there with the evidence, but the common sense is sort of the connective tissue that allows that juror to come up with that narrative in the juror's own mind as to what this case is about.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard, as we're waiting for Donald Trump to re-enter the courtroom, and it can be in the next 5 minutes or so, we had just reported that Joe Biden, in a radio interview today, said that he was willing to debate. So, of course, it didn't take long for Donald Trump to post on Truth Social. He said, "Crooked Joe Biden just announced that he's willing to debate. Everyone knows he doesn't really mean it, but in case he does, I say anywhere, anytime, any place." The Post went on to say that since Biden is in New York City today, and I should say that we saw his motorcade going past 30 Rock here, and like Trump, who is, quote, stuck in one of the many court cases that he instigated as election interference against a political opponent, a continuing witch hunt, all of which has been disproved. The pair should debate at the courthouse tonight on national television. I'll wait around. Let me get your analysis of this. No big surprise about Donald Trump, but it looks like, could we see a debate?
Right. First of all, I don't expect that we have a Friday Night Live rendition here in Lower Manhattan. It's a little sleepy around these parts come Friday evenings. But look, Donald Trump is looking for a storyline that is not this. And of course, as a general election candidate, he would love to debate Joe Biden. And there is nothing that would preclude Joe Biden from agreeing to debate right now. Donald Trump, though, has made this a case. At campaign events, he has brought on an empty podium to signify that he's ready to debate Joe Biden whenever the current Democratic president would like to. Of course, there's typically 3 presidential debates that are organized by the presidential
Speaking
debate
of the
commission,
man, you may not be able to see this, Vaughn,
those usually take place in September and October.
Donald Trump just walked in. I'm just making note of the fact you probably can't see it, but he just walked back into the courtroom. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So usually those debates don't take place till September or October, but this was notable because Joe Biden has, over the course of the last many months, made the suggestion that, well, let's see how he acts before we make a commitment to the debates, a longstanding tradition for Republican and Democratic nominees to do. And so today in the Howard Stern interview, Joe Biden suggesting that he would look and seek to debate Donald Trump at the appropriate time. And of course, now Trump utilizing that to say, well, let's do it now.
I was just talking about the fact that, I think jurors take their job very seriously. And Paul Butler, I'm wondering, when they're told you can't read, you can't look up anything about this case, you can't go home and Google, who David Pecker is or, what a non-prosecution agreement is or any of that stuff, can they be following this part of it? Can they be following the campaign part of it and still be legitimately following what the judge told them?
No, they're not supposed to look at any news item regarding Donald Trump. It doesn't matter if it has to do with the campaign and certainly not the trial. And in my experience, they do take that responsibility very seriously.
So, guys, what are you looking for when we restart here? What can and should the defense do here before we finish with this witness?
As much as holes they can poke in him, I know he's mild-mannered. I know he's coming across as a genuine guy. I know they can't get him on selling AMI for extra money. There are some inconsistencies. His agreement to testify, I think they're in a difficult spot. I think overall, Pecker is a win. Whether it's a 100% win or a 95% win for the prosecution. He set that foundation. He set the groundwork. We know what this is about. And now all the spokes are going to come from him as we hear from other witnesses.
Paul Butler, thank you. Vaughn, Tristan, Jeremy, you're going to stand by. Coming up, we're going to take a closer look at the judge at the center of Donald Trump's historic trial, how he's handled this unprecedented case so far, and the ongoing attacks from the former president. A retired judge who's known Juan Merchan for 15 years will join us after this.